And we want to start here, correct?
Yeah, thank you, Alicia. If you don't mind playing the video first, and then we will dive right in.
Do or do not. There is no try.
I never saw your future, only its possibilities. You have such a capacity for goodness. Arrogance and fear still keep you from learning the simplest and most significant lesson of all.
Which is?
It's not about you.
You don't know about real loss, because it only occurs when you love something more than you love yourself.
Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
True courage is about knowing not when to take a life, but when to spare one.
Because some men aren't looking for anything logical, like money. They can't be bought, bullied, reasoned, or negotiated with. Some men just want to watch the world burn.
Either you karate do yes, or karate do no. You karate do gesso, just like grip.
There is a deep magic more powerful than any of us that rules over all of Narnia. It defines right from wrong and governs all our destinies. Yours and mine.
If you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball, right? Any other questions?
Dark and difficult times lie ahead. Soon we must all face the choice between what is right and what is easy. Remember this. You have friends here. You're not alone.
Okay, thank you, Alicia. So I see we don't really have that many people. We can make this session much more interactive. So I don't expect to be the one talking all the time. And, please feel free to unmute and chime in if you have any comments or anything you want to share based on your experiences or learnings. If you've been part of mentor-mentee relationship, or you'd like to be in one and you don't know, or you maybe approached it the wrong way, or any successes you might have had. So thank you for watching that mentor montage. I think it's video clips from different movies, but a lot of these things happen in our real lives where we're stuck in situations, and if we have, or if we're conflicted or confused about situations, and having someone to reach out to help get some clarity or different points of view is always helpful. So how do we look at a successful mentorship? And I'm going to ask the question, so I hope people can chime in with answers, and there's no right or wrong, so don't feel like we're going to score this. What do you think are the most important parts of a successful mentorship?
Are you asking from the?
Yeah, from everyone who's here. And if you don't know the answer, that's fine. We get the answer like in the following slides. But, and Alicia, you can go to the next slide. So I think with everything that we do in life, not just about a mentorship, you have to know the why. Why are you doing something? It could be for personal gain, to develop, to grow, whatever it is. Everyone needs to know their why. And whether you're going to mentor someone or you're going to be a mentee, you need to know why you're getting into that relationship. So for mentors, if you've mentored anyone or you want to mentor someone in the future, there are some things, and this is not an all-inclusive list, but just a few bullet points or call outs that kind of highlight what's in it for the mentors. Why should you be a mentor? It helps you develop your own leadership skills because you're kind of sharpening your skills, you're sharing them with other people. it gives you personal fulfillment because you've achieved a level of success in that area, and it gives you fulfillment because you're sharing those with other people who are relatively new or junior and want that insight from you. You're also fostering and growing talent, whether it is within your company or, you know, with a cause that you might be associated to. So for example, this Dress for Success event that we're doing right now, you know, if you have people who sign up to be mentors for you, why are they doing it? These could be some of the reasons why they want to do it. And then for mentees, like if you're interested in being a mentee, I think some of the things you could look for as part of the mentorship relationship would be getting feedback from experienced leaders, building your professional network if you're lacking in that area, and also correcting gaps in specific skills and knowledge if you want to go that route. So you could pick a mentor who could provide you that. And you definitely gain personal and professional development through the exercise. It could be either what to do or what not to do. Either way, it's a good learning. And then who makes a good mentor? So when you're picking a mentor, there are a couple of things that you should be careful about. Don't just pick anybody that you think is successful. So more than just a successful individual, they need to have the desire to develop people. And very important is the ability and availability. They could be extremely successful and, you know, they could have the disposition, but if they don't have time to commit to this relationship, it's not going to be successful. So make sure that that is, you know, put up front when you start to get into a mentee relationship with someone. They should be able to or willing to share their personal experiences and failures. So it has to be a very candid relationship where you can be very open and honest on both ends. And then eventually they should have the skill in developing others. A lot of people are really good in being successful themselves or reaching the heights of success in their field, but may not have the skill in developing other people. And some of the skills are, you know, written down there. I won't read all of them, but they should be good listeners. They should be able to pull information out of those of mentees by asking powerful, open-ended questions and providing feedback and stories to you when you need that. Next slide. Okay. And how do we make the most of a relationship when you're in a mentoring or a mentorship type relationship as a mentee? So I think we talked about it in the previous slides. Look for the right mentor, someone who really cares about you and your success and the fact that they are in the long game with you, helping you achieve your goals. It's not just about going for these meetings and telling what's going on. It's not a one-on-one session. It is much deeper than that. In order to achieve the most out of a mentorship relationship, you also need to set clear objectives. So you need to be clear about what you need mentoring on and how will you measure success. Ideally, do this at the beginning of that relationship so the expectations are clear on both ends. Be open-minded. It goes without saying when you're going to someone for feedback or you're asking for input, you have to be open-minded and be willing to receive feedback, whether it's negative or positive. You have to look at it as growth for yourself. And then taking responsibility. So it's not about your mentor solving all your problems or having answers to everything. They're not going to be able to wave a magic wand and solve your problems for you. You have to take responsibility once you get feedback and guidance to follow through with that. And then finally, be prepared for each mentoring session. I know this is common sense and we should do that, but oftentimes a lot of us forget that. Make sure you have an agenda so you're not misusing your time and your mentor's time, and provide them regular updates once you've received some coaching and guidance with your mentor.
The one thing I will drop in there, Sheetal, is I have done that last one, not done that last one, and showed up to a mentor or somebody who was way more senior than me without an agenda. And the meeting got super awkward because it was basically like, that's cool. What did you want to talk about?
Yeah.
just sit there looking at each other and they're like, okay, well, it's good talking to you. And you kind of waste the opportunity you have with somebody who could be helping you out a lot.
Absolutely.
For me, the most critical and also some of the hardest things to do is crap, what are we going to talk about?
Yeah. And it can't be last minute, like you've experienced it yourself. So you have to invest some time in it, thinking through what do you want out of that meeting and how will you go back using that in your career or in your life. So yeah, definitely. And then eventually you'll get to know your mentor. So you'll know what to do for every session. And finally, I think it is important for you to know, are you a good mentee? For the success of the relationship, you have to play your part. So be clear about what you're looking for, understand the value of their time, be open to feedback and accepting criticism. And at the end of the day, it's about learning. So you have to be open to that, learning new things, whether it's work related or about your personal attributes. Be extremely open to learn. Okay, I think that was my last slide. If anybody has any questions and wants to ask them now, I'm happy to answer them, or we can wait for Cope to finish his session on finding your voice, and we could park questions for later. Either way, I'm open to both.
I have a couple questions that maybe you can answer, get your opinion on. So with mentors, do you always have to have the same mentor, or do you switch up mentors?
It depends what stage of your career you're in. Sometimes it helps to have just one mentor when you're starting out, but in my experience, at least I personally have had at least 2 mentors at a time, and they both may serve different purposes. And the same mentor doesn't have to be a lifelong mentor. So as you grow in your career and, you know, change the pace of how you're doing things, you may want to look for a new mentor.
We do have a question in the chat. How do you go about asking someone to be a mentor?
I think it's as simple as that, but it can be unnerving depending on who you're asking, and sometimes we're afraid that people will say no. So I think the first step is really just going and asking them and explaining to them why you want them to be your mentor. So I think you have to be able to explain, one, why you want to mentor and why that person in particular. And once you have that, you know, there's very few people who would say no unless, you know, they have time constraints or something like that. So I would say go for it and be prepared to tell them why you want them as your mentor, but be open to hearing no. Sometimes people will say no and it has nothing to do with you. Just know that. So don't stop trying if you get one no.
Also, the other thing that I've found with some people with mentors is they'll get a yes, and then they're like, oh, well, he's super busy. I'll wait for the mentor to contact me. You've got like 1,000 things going on there. You asked, you initiated, so keep initiating and don't feel like it's an imposition. The mentor will tell you if it's an imposition. They wouldn't have said yes if they didn't want you asking. So keep going back and saying like, okay, can we meet in 3 weeks? Okay, sweet. And then you set it up. And because otherwise, if you wait on the mentor, like I said, they got a bunch of stuff normally going on. And it's not as a high a priority as it's going to be for you. So make sure that you get that time from them and just set it up and be like, hey, if they said okay, I'm going to assume it's an okay, and I'm going to keep going until they tell me not.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions for right now? All right. Well, thank you. Cope, you can start when you're ready.
Right on. Actually, I think I just segued to my own stuff. But anyways, we're talking about finding your voice. Yeah. So to what Alicia said earlier, obviously, I'm not part of Women at Zynga, but I'm an ally for Women at Zynga. And I try and walk the talk, I guess, as it were. And if you look at my leadership group, there's about 150 people in it, and a large chunk of them are female. And it's because they're super talented, just that. And part of them, sometimes it's giving them opportunities to grow, and sometimes, and part of the reason I'm passionate about this is in a lot of cases, getting females to grow in a male world is they're wait for permission, and they're waiting for something. They're waiting for permission. They're waiting for their space. They're waiting for, numerous things. And so like I've had quite a bit of experience helping to mentor up female leadership and trying to get them to step in and find their voice and not wait for somebody to give them permission, and just let them go be great on their own without anybody giving them permission. That's why I'm super passionate about this. So with that, we'll get going. If you've got questions, feel free to type them in here. I will try not to talk at 1,000 miles an hour, but it's a hazard of me. Okay, so what does it mean to find your voice? You can see the definition here that I kind of came up with, but it's basically being confident enough to ask questions, to state an opinion, to engage in a conversation, and defend it. Like, you know, sometimes it's worth defending, sometimes not. We'll talk about what that means. But basically, you're willing to stand up for yourself and for others, because you'll find that as the more you find your voice, you start looking for others and seeing others who haven't found their voice, and you can use your voice to step in to make space for them, and defend others as well. So multiple reasons here. So let's take a look. We're going to kind of back into this. Let's take a look at what it's not. Because a lot of times people are like, oh, finding my voice means I have to answer all the questions and I have to get into all the, like, I have to be like super engaged, and it doesn't mean that. So let's take a look at what it's not. It's not talking over everyone else. That's not what finding your voice means. It's not answering every question, because I've seen this too with people trying to find their voice. They're like, oh, that just means I got to answer every question. I got to be the first one to talk, and I'm talking over people so they know that I got the answer, and that's my voice. And that's not what that is necessarily. It's not fighting every battle. Sometimes there's battles that show up that you're like, you know what? I'm just going to let that hot mess just float on by, and I don't need to engage in that. But sometimes people who are, you know, trying to make themselves heard or figure out what their voice is will engage on everything. And honestly, you got to pick your battles. You got to figure out what's important to you and what's not. And the stuff that's not, you got to let it go. What is not? You see down here, not listening to others. You have to be listening to others. It's engaging in a conversation. The last thing you want to do is be advocating for yourself that other people listen to you and then you not listen to them. So it's a dialogue going on, and it's you standing up for yourself, but it's also you listening to others. These next two actually came from my divisional art director, who is an introvert, but she leads all of art for our division, which is about 100 people at multiple levels and things like that. And one of the things that she and I have worked on a lot, her specifically, is her putting in the effort for it is finding your voice, but she's an introvert. She doesn't go out of her way, like she doesn't engage highly. She's not super talkative in big crowds and things like that. And in the way she put it is, a lot of times if you present me with a problem, I've got 1,000 voices in my head and I'm trying to process them all, and I'll sit and think, and everybody else in the conversation will move on. I also suffer from this sometimes. What I found, and the trap I found that I fell into, was I would get in executive meetings, and like at the time it was a general manager would say something like, hey, I really think you need to do this thing. And I'd be like, okay. And what I was saying was, I acknowledge that you're talking, but what like my boss heard was, you just agreed to do something that you know is stupid. And I'm like, yeah, but I want to process and see if I can come up with a better solution. He goes, but you didn't say that. All you said was okay, and you agreed to it. And I'm like, and he goes, and now your team's kind of signed up for it, and you either got to back your way out of it and find a graceful way, or you're stuck. So what I've found in some of these things is, you don't have to make the decision right now. A lot of times people assume you have to make the decision in the moment. You don't, especially if you don't know, and you're like, I got to process these things because there's a lot of variables. Sometimes it needs to be like, you know what? The way I put it is, let me chew on it for a little bit and I'll get back to you. And that's me saying, okay, I've got a lot of voices in my head and I haven't come to a conclusion on which one I'm going to listen to yet. And what I'm going to do is, I'm going to go figure out what my answer is and I'm going to get back to you. The key here is I'm not letting the decision be locked in before I can voice it. And that's critical to find your voice. You don't have to say it right then. The key is that, like, give yourself space that you can come back and then find your voice in a quiet moment or whatever it takes. Sometimes it just takes me going for a drive or something. Let the brain churn on it a little bit. But like I said, the second point here is just don't let the decision be made without you if you care about it. And then the last point is, finding your voice doesn't mean you have to become an extrovert unless you are one already. I mean, if you're an introvert, that doesn't mean that you have to like all of a sudden be super chatty and things like that. I've known many passionate leaders that were introverts. And the way you knew it is they didn't say much, but when they did say something, you listened, because they weren't going to say anything unless they were really, really passionate about it. And when they did, you doubled down on what that was. And like, okay, let me hear more about what you're thinking there, because you didn't want that to go away, because usually that was super intense for them. And you're like, okay, let's get that information out of you. Okay, we'll go on to the next one here. All right, so let's start talking about what it does look like. I think this first one is the biggest reason that people don't find their voice, is they're worried about looking bad or being wrong. That's always like in the back of my head. Like, am I right? Am I right? Am I 100% on this thing? And what I found is it doesn't necessarily always matter. Like, especially if it's a discussion, you can be wrong. You could not have all the data, and then you're like, oh, well, you're right. I hadn't considered that. And you can walk it back, but don't let the fear of possibly being wrong prevent you from stepping into that moment and taking your opportunity. Because if you do, you'll never step up. You just won't, because you'll be too scared of like, oh, what if I'm wrong? What if I don't have all the facts? One of the things I found in my job is I never have 100% of all the facts I need to ever make a decision, never. And if I do, it's too late to make the decision. Usually I'm operating at about 30% of the information that I need to make a call. And then I'm just like, you know what? We're going to make the call and we're going to jump. And if for some reason I get more data down the line, I will adjust. Or I know what the risk is if I can't make the decision later and it's not reversible. Okay, we'll make the call and we'll go. But I can't ever wait for 100% of the data to come in, which means that there's a 70% chance that I'm going to be wrong, at least, because I may not have all the data. And it could come in later. And sometimes you just have to run. Let's see. Ability to stand up for yourself and others. Like I said, sometimes it's creating space for you and for others. It's the ability to be consistent. One of the things I've found when mentoring people trying to find their voices, specifically females, it's kind of a physiological thing. Dudes have a lot of times big, dark, deep voices, and it kind of triggers a like, oh, step back. I know I can do it with my kids. It drives my wife nuts, where she can yell at them and they're like, yeah, okay, whatever. But I yell them and they're like, oh crap, it's hitting the fan right now. Because my voice is deep and I'm incredibly overly loud. And actually the one thing that helps now in COVID is Zoom is the great equalizer. If anybody is big and loud and boisterous, you can turn them down easy. But when you're in a conference room with everybody's in the conference room and some of the people are big and loud and boisterous and kind of overpowering personalities, it can be challenging, especially if it's a bunch of people talking. One of the things I've found working with some of the leads that I've mentored is be consistent. You might not get your point across then, but if you're consistent and you're constantly saying the same thing, you're chipping away, and eventually somebody's going to listen. If nothing else, to try and shut you up. Hey, I don't care why you're trying to shut me up, as long as you're listening to what I have to say and you're doing what I'm asking you to do. So part of the finding your voice is being consistent with whatever it is that you're doing. One of the things, I was working with one of our lead producers, and she had just overhauled how they were working on content. And people didn't understand, it wasn't important to people at the time. And we were trying to make it important to people. And she goes, I'm super frustrated because I get in these meetings and I have the data and nobody else has the data, and it's like they don't care. And I'm like, you have to make them care. You have to just be that lone voice, and you have to just be consistent over and over and over. It'll come, but you've got to be consistent. I wasn't in the meeting, so I couldn't give her the space, and it wasn't appropriate for me to be in the meeting. And lo and behold, eventually we got to the point where now people would, she's now moved into a different position, but when she was in that position, people didn't make a move on anything concerning the area she was an expert at without consulting her, which was a huge win. Like literally she could stand in there and be like, this is what we need to do. And everybody's like, oh yeah, we should do that. And so it was a pretty major flip, but it took, a bit. And it wasn't like, 2 weeks. We're talking like months to a year kind of thing. Okay. So how do you find your voice? This is not the There's no silver bullet here. There's no magic tricks to this, but there's a lot of pieces that like hints I can give you on how this works. First thing, start small. Don't try and take on the world all at once. Find something that you're super passionate about, or something that just rubs you the wrong way, is unacceptable. Find that thing and voice your concerns or your questions, or your, why you're doubling down on this thing. Figure out what that is and pick that one thing. Another part of this is, you've heard there's several books, lots of books on like finding your why. Look for what your why is. What do you like goes back to that, what you're passionate about. And it's more than just, I won't get into it because it's a whole book series. If you're ever curious about it, look up Finding Your Why by Simon Sinek. It's good stuff. Do your homework. A lot of times going into a meeting, you know what's going to be discussed. Make sure you understand, at least at a base level, what you're going to be talking about, and then think about how do you feel about it? Is there anything that you're super passionate about, or super passionate about it not happening? Do your homework and get stuff, like be prepared for it so you're not caught by surprise, because it's always challenging to find your voice when you're caught by surprise. A lot of times people, you end up with fight or flight, and then you either are like too up in somebody's business, or you just basically shrink into yourself. That's for everybody. That's not male versus female. That's anybody. And same thing, mentally prepare for upcoming opportunities. These kind of go specifically, especially towards if you're going into a job interview, or like when you're first starting your job. Like a lot of this is just mentally getting yourself in the mode of preparing yourself for it. And then this next one, the next two actually kind of goes back to what Cheeto was talking about, is find an ally to make space. What I mean by this is find somebody in that meeting and say, look, I'm having challenges, like if it's an ongoing meeting or something like that. I'm having challenges getting heard. Like people are talking over me over and over and over, and I can't get a word in edgewise, and it's super frustrating. And I don't want to raise my hand like a school kid. I need your help. Give me space in that thing. And they may be like, sure, what do you need? And for me, like when I'm working with people that are finding their voice, the way I do it is, hey, I haven't heard from so-and-so. What do you think? It's as easy as that. Like constantly just be like, yo, so-and-so hasn't talked yet. Let's hear from them. What is your opinion? What do you think? And then go back to them over, like, it's super easy. And you can give that advice to like somebody to make space, and usually look for somebody who's in the room who has found their voice, or, is, a little bit more senior, and they can help with that. Mentors help with this as well, specifically with the do your homework, getting in the, right mindset, and looking at, getting prepped for that opportunity. Mentors are great for this. Like, perfect. That's exactly what you would take to a mentor and be like, hey, I've got an upcoming job interview. This is what the job is for. This is what the company does. How do I get prepared for it? And you guys could run mock interviews. They could just ask you a bunch of questions, give you homework to do. There's a lot of things there that a mentor can help with to get you prepped. And the last thing, it's easy to be, to get discouraged. To be like, oh man, I had my opportunity to find my voice and I screwed it up. I'll never find it again. It's not a one-time thing. Now, there are big opportunities like job interviews and stuff like that where you're like, I just want to kick myself because I didn't do as good as I thought I could. But it's not a process, or it's not an event. It's a process. It's ongoing over and over and over. And so, yeah, you may have had a bad event that could have not made you, find your voice, but figure out what you could have done better and figure it out so that the next time you're prepared, and you keep growing, and you're building on each of the events. Eventually your process, you start looking back and go, what? I figured this out. One day you'll wake up and realize it doesn't scare you to stand in that gap and like fight or stand up or defend or question. Next slide, please. And then the last thing is like, why does it matter? And I think most of us kind of inherently know, but I want everybody to kind of think about it a little bit. It's kind of a life lesson. I don't want to get preachy here, but you got to stand up for what you believe in. You don't want to go through life getting walked over. And like I said, you don't have to have big lofty things. Sometimes it's just like, look, I need to know where my line is, and I'm not going to cross it. It can be nerve wracking, but that's one of those things, especially in business, where you just like, there are lines that you don't want to cross, and it's not necessarily a black and white issue. It could be just super gray. Asking the right questions. So it starts showing that you're engaged, especially if you're in meetings where like managers and bosses are involved and stuff like that. It shows that you're engaged, and you start asking questions, and you're asking, like, hey, what did you think about that? Or how is this working? And maybe that we should think about it like this. It's showing that you're trying to help solve the problem, and you're engaged in like making the business better. And so that starts reflecting well on you. It's like, look, I'm engaged. I'm trying to help. I guarantee you no boss is going to fault you for that. And the third one here is it shows you're thinking things through. You formed an opinion, or you're trying to. In some cases, that's some of the hardest things is trying to figure out how do I feel about that thing. And then the last thing is it's hard to be an effective leader if you're passive. And everybody might not want to be I don't have grand plans to be a leader. But you never know. There's some people that don't have plans to be a leader that end up being leaders. I've seen it happen a lot of times where it's like, that wasn't my, I had one guy who was my number 2 when I used to work at Electronic Arts, and he did not want to, like, literally I had to talk him into it. Like, he didn't want to do it, and he never had plans for it, didn't think he could do it. And I had to go to him and convince him that I thought he would be great at it. And as it turns out, he was freaking brilliant. And so you never know what you're going to need or when you're going to need it, or some opportunity that might show up where you become passionate about something. And you end up, backing into a leadership position. So it's one of those things of helping you be prepared for, you never know what could come. And then I have a cool clip, although I don't think it's as cool as Sheetal's. This is from one of my favorite clips from one of the movies. I read this to my daughter at her graduation.
In a time when no one wanted to see a woman succeed at either. And she said, compromise where you can. Where you can't, don't. Even if everyone is telling you that something wrong is something right. Even if the whole world is telling you to move, it is your duty to plant yourself like a tree, look them in the eye and say, no, you move.
Anyways, that was, if anybody's curious, that was from Captain America Civil War.
One's how she managed to master.
All right. That's all I had to talk about, but I would love to have a discussion about this and more about like mentorship. And I know Sheetal would as well. And she's got plenty that she can give on like finding your voice as well. Cause I know she's clearly found it.
Yeah, I think one of the things you mentioned, Cope, really resonated with me was, when you're in a group of people that are really loud and more boisterous than you yourself are. And I've found myself to be in that situation more often than not. And I think it is your own perception of the situation that holds you back more than the actual situation from my learnings. It's not that people want to shut you down or they don't want you to talk. It's just that they have more opinions than you do, and some of them are more vocal. So it's important for you to know that, one, understand people are willing to listen to you, and find that pause and use that to share what you have to share, but make it worthwhile. Like, don't just say things for the sake of saying them, because more often than not, like when you start doing that, people will shut you down. They'll be like, okay, they're just saying something useless. So think through what you want to share, have a relevant point of view. And what has helped me is I like to pre-wire people. When I'm going to share something that they haven't heard of before or is sort of a new idea, I like to pre-wire at least a few people before a meeting in which I'm going to meet like 10, 15 people and throw a randomly new idea, which can throw people off. So it helps if you pre-wire them and get their thoughts too, right? I mean, why can't you ask them what they think about it before the meeting instead of going into a meeting and getting people worked up? So it's always helpful to prepare when you can. And the one thing that you mentioned, Copa, was knowing the why. I think, and I mentioned it in my slide as well, it's extremely important for everything you decide to do in life. Because you can just, let life lead you, or you decide what you want to do and why you want to do. And that applies to every single thing that you do. It's not a lot of work when you start doing it and practicing it. So if you already think that way, then that's amazing. But if you don't, try and do that in the next decision you're going to make, or the next step you're going to take in whatever field.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, actually, we use that. Actually, you're talking about the pre-wiring. We do. We call it socializing. It's the exact same thing. Especially if it's bad news. Don't surprise people. That, like, if you got a big meeting, if you're going to either, to Sheetal's point, if you're going to spring a new idea on them, or you're going to give them bad news, have a conversation beforehand offline where you're talking to them just one-on-ones. And a lot of times they will give you additional feedback on some stuff that you're like, oh, I hadn't thought of that. I will make sure to address that when I'm presenting what I'm presenting. Because if you've addressed all of the issues, if you know, oh, the major players in the room, here's the major problems they have, and I've already got an answer for them, a lot of times you'll see them go, oh, yeah, I've totally seen my boss do it, where he will do this and he's delivering bad news, but he's already talked to the major players and he's already made sure that we have answers for everything. And then we go in there and he goes, here's the bad news. And everybody's like, yeah, understood. Sounds like you got it handled though. Good job. Literally, we walk away. We're like, what? So like, don't hesitate to like that's part of the homework, I think, is not only getting yourself prepared, but if you know that this is going to be like a major thing, get other people prepared as well.
I know in one of your points, standing up for what you believe in, yesterday when one of our speakers were talking, Amanda, we talked about interview questions and questions that you should ask an employer when you're interviewing. And one of her questions was to them, how many women do you have in senior leadership roles? And the reason that she asked is because that was super important to her. That was something she believes in. That's something that she wanted to know, that A, is this company that I'm going to work for? And although it takes guts to ask, and it makes you feel a little uncomfortable asking maybe certain questions like that, but it was very important to her, and she found her voice by asking that question in the interview.
Yeah, that's a great one. The other one that you can kind of, if that one makes it, is that one, I could see where that one would make you feel awkward. The other thing that you might ask is, what support do you have for female employees in your org? Like, I mean, the group that from Zynga that's sponsoring this is Wizard of Oz. One of our games is Wizard of Oz slots, so it's WOZ, and then there's women at Zynga, which is WAZ, and I get them mixed up. But women at Zynga, like I've had that interview question come back at me several times about like, what support do you have for women in your org, and how do you make sure that they're taken care of equally? Yeah, it's huge. And I'm super proud of the work that WAZ is doing. So yeah, I would absolutely ask your potential employers questions like that. Yeah, it's awkward, but there's not anybody going to be, two things. If it's a good employer, they're not going to bat an eye. They'll be like, oh yeah, you're right. Here's the answer, or we don't have a good answer and I'm working on it. Or two, they're going to say, I can't believe you'd ask that question. I'm not going to hire you. And you don't want to be working there anyways, I don't think, honestly. It's, yeah.
All right. Other questions? Feel free to unmute and ask, or you can type them into chat. I know there's a couple people that aren't able to talk, so I'll give you just a second. Okay. No questions, comments, concerns? Question. I thought I heard somebody, sorry. Okay. Well, thank you all for coming. Sheetal and Cope, thank you for presenting today. The rest of you, Teal will follow back up with.
Actually, there's a question just popped up.
There is. How do you deal with repercussions of speaking up? That's a great question.
Oh yeah. Sheila, you want to do this one or you want me to? Oh, I can chip in after.
Yeah, sure. We can tag team. I think it depends. I don't know what you mean by repercussions of speaking up. Generally speaking, I haven't really seen repercussions of speaking up unless it's one of those employee issue situations where there's retaliation for escalating an issue or speaking up negatively about, and that could be fair feedback about someone in the leadership chain. And in those situations, like in your company, you have different recourses. You could go to HR. They have, some companies even have an ombudsman. I don't know if that was your question. If it was something different, let me know.
The other thing I would say is this might present another opportunity to find your voice, as weird as it sounds, is if somebody comes to you and say, I can't believe you spoke up in that meeting, ask them why. Yeah, hey, thanks for that feedback. Why exactly did that offend you? Or why did you get upset at that? Or why did that shock you? Oh, it did. Why is that? Just keep asking, just keep poking. Why? What could I have done different? How could I have done it that wouldn't have been offensive to you? What would have changed? Why do you feel so strongly in the opposite direction? Why, if you're offended that I spoke up, why did you speak up? Have that conversation, have a real conversation with them, engage in them. Maybe they're going to be hateful and, essentially a jerk, and that you can engage. But, you might be surprised that people are willing to have a real conversation with you, but you can't get defensive right off the bat. If you get defensive, you shut down, and they're going to feel, oh, you're getting defensive with me, I'm getting defensive with you. And they shut down, then there's no conversation happening. You got to kind of like check the ego for a second, and it's not easy. It's definitely not easy. I have a hard time with it too, but take a breath and be like, okay, I understand you. It may not be fair feedback, but you could be like, I understand your feedback. I'm having a hard time seeing where you're coming from. Help me understand. And then just push on it that way and see if there's a conversation to be had there and some dialogue. And you never know, you might actually find an ally there. You might not agree, but you might find an ally because you're willing to engage and you're willing to let down the defenses to have a real conversation.
Yep. I think someone has a comment here.
Sorry, yeah.
My supervisor didn't like that I was just doing what was instructed. I was questioning why we were doing unnecessary work. The next week I was moved. Yeah, that's interesting, and I've heard that in my career at different points in time, where if you question your boss on their decision-making skills, some of them do not appreciate that, and I think you will always find those situations, unfortunately, where you have people who don't want to be questioned on their decision. It's different from finding your voice. I think what Cope was sharing is much broader than that, but yes, this is part of it. And there's ways to asking that question. Not knowing the details of that situation, I can't comment on exactly how you could have done it better. However, if you have a manager who retaliates against you just because you're asking why they made a certain decision, maybe it is better that you move to a different team. But I would say my advice to you would be to engage your HR person. Make sure that, one, not just because you want to get back at your boss, that's not the point here, but you want to make sure that this kind of behavior is not repeated and that they get the required feedback and they correct their behavior in the future. So not only are you protecting yourself, but you're also making sure that this is not repeated either against you or anyone else.
I will add to that I also wouldn't let it deter you from doing it again sometime. Maybe not with that particular supervisor, but just because you did have a bad experience with that supervisor, don't let that stop you from finding your voice with someone else in another meeting or in another situation going further.
Yep.
Yeah, the other thing I would say is that it's always challenging to question your boss. One of the things, I was in a leadership training course one time, and the leader described it to me as, your boss has a bag of crap sitting in his office. it's at any point just about ready to overflow. If you come in and dump a bunch more crap in it, he's not going to be super happy with you, and he's probably not going to react great. It's just human nature. So he's like, if you're going to show up to your boss with a problem, essentially dumping crap in the bag, try and have a solution so that you're taking it back out, or it's net zero. So like, oh, hey, look, I see that we're doing unnecessary work. I had some solutions that might, like, first, why are we doing the work? And if he's got a legit reason, you're like, oh, okay. But you might be like, look, I think there might be a way that we can do this more efficiently. Do you mind if I dig in a little bit? A lot of times I'll be like, yeah, fine, whatever, figure it out. All right, cool. Or maybe they, you know, you could get shut down. That's fine. But, you know, one of the things is be willing to try and help be part of the solution and not just be like, that sucks, that sucks. I'm not saying that's what you're doing, but I've seen people do that where all they do is complain about stuff. Yeah, that doesn't help. But if you show up and be part of the solution, then people are usually a lot more likely to be like, oh, okay, well, they're engaged and they're trying to help. And that's usually, you know, that's another way you back into leadership positions, honestly.
Yeah, I agree. And I think personally, what I've done in many situations when I'm not fully sold on why I'm being asked to do something, I'll do it anyway. And then I'll share my experience and how much time got wasted and how it could have been helpful to have more help or have someone else do it or not do that work at all. And provide options, like Cope mentioned, solutions. Like, you've gone through this crappy situation or this experience, you don't want it to be repeated, and this is how. Let's not do this again. So you become part of the solution, and usually that is obviously much better viewed from the leadership than just pushing back every time.
Right on. Cool. Yes. Thank you, Charlene. Those are good questions. Really hard and not easy, like either for dudes or dudettes. So.
Anybody else? All right. Well, thank you all very much. As Teal said, we do have one-on-one mentors set up for Thursday and Friday. So if you feel like this would be a good opportunity that you would like to meet with one of the Zynga mentors, just reach out to Teal afterwards, and she's still setting those up. And if you are signed up, we'll see you on Thursday and Friday. And thanks all for joining. Have a good day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.